Hi, y'all. I'm Julie. I'm a trauma-informed adoptee coach and somatic healing guide. After overcoming deep abandonment wounds, I now help adult adoptees move from feeling lost and disconnected to experiencing profound self-belonging. I know what it is like to carry the weight of abandonment, to feel stuck in patterns of longing, adapting, and searching for belonging. To have tried every healing modality available and come up empty. My own healing has taught me this. The answers aren't out there. They're buried within me, and I'm here to guide you home to yourself. The Resilience Project podcast brings voice, visibility, and validation to the parts of adoption society rarely names, but all of us feel. Through a trauma-informed somatic lens, I explore the lived experiences of the entire adoption constellation with a tender emphasis on the adoptee experience. This podcast goes beyond storytelling into soul-telling. It offers embodied insight, compassionate education, and a path towards awareness, hope, and strength. Each episode invites listeners to understand adoption more deeply, not just with the mind, but with the nervous system, and to reconnect with the truth, identity, and belonging that were always yours to come home to. Welcome. Welcome back to the Resilience Project podcast. I am so excited to be with you today. And we have one of my dear friends, Dr. Liz DeBetta, with us, and I cannot wait for this conversation. It's been one that I have been, holding close for a long time. We are so excited and jazzed, y'all, because we have something that we're bringing to you that we're just, I got no words. If you're an adoptee or someone who loves an adoptee, you already know that healing doesn't just live in words. It lives in the body. It lives in the places that didn't have language yet. It lives in what was felt, absorbed, and adapted long before we even had a story to tell. And this is really where Liz comes in. Today, I am joined by someone who understands that truth at the deepest level, artistically, intellectually, and embodied. This is Dr. Liz DeBetta. I'm going to read directly her bio because it's pretty powerful. She is the creator of Unmothered, an award-winning solo performance that has resonated with adoptees across the world because it speaks of what so many of us have never had permission to say. She's an artist, a writer, an educator, and the founder of Migrating Toward Wholeness, a trauma-informed, she's got her lovely mug, it's sitting right in front of her. It's a trauma-informed, arts-based narrative healing framework. She holds a PhD in interdisciplinary studies with emphases in creative writing. This woman's prolific, y'all. Creative writing, feminist critical theory, and social justice. She has spent over a decade working at the intersection of lived experience as an adoptee herself. I'm putting stuff in here because, girl, you're amazing. Research and storytelling for systems change. She is the author of Adult Adoptees and Writing to Heal, Migrating Toward Wholeness. Her work centers around voice reclamation, identity integration, and the healing power of transforming silence into language and action. Unmothered emerged directly from her long-term creative, scholarly, and embodied inquiry into adoption, trauma, and becoming the subject of one's own story. That's really one of my favorite things that you do in your workshops is that, becoming your own subject. So together, oh my gosh, I'm so excited. Okay, together, Liz and I are announcing something that we believe has never existed before. It's called Unmothered, a Revolution in Adoptee Healing. It's a 2-day, in-person somatic and narrative retreat by adoptees, for adoptees. This isn't a conference. This isn't just a performance you watch and then go home unchanged. And this isn't just surface level healing. This is an immersive experience that weaves story, body, nervous system, and community because adoptee healing really does require that. In today's episode, we are going to talk frankly about why this retreat exists, why we felt the need to do this. And actually, it germinated from one of my clients. he wanted to bring Liz's new digitally available movie to Moscow, which is where we're going to have this in Moscow, Idaho. So he had this idea, and I said, dude, let's make this into an event. And then he connected with Liz, and we've been planning ever since. So we're very, very excited. So what makes this different from anything you've likely experienced before? We're going to talk about that. And who is this experience truly for? If your body has ever known there was more healing available than talk alone, this conversation and this retreat is for you. So welcome, Liz. I am so excited to have you. Is there anything you want to add?
Hi, my friend. I am so excited to be here and to share the story of how this retreat came to be and all the other stories that we're going to get to talk about. I do want to just say really quickly that in just a minute ago, you talked about how important community is in a healing experience. And what we're going to share today and the details of the thing that we have created together came out of community.
Mm-hmm. That's a really good point. I didn't even think about that. See, you
Mhm.
making these links. This is just what you do. I love it. It's true. It really did come out of community. What a beautiful thing. So for those who are new to your work, but quite honestly, I don't think there's a lot of those people. But for those who are new to your work, there's got to be some.
There's got to be.
Yeah. Can you share what Unmothered means and why this story needed to be told the way you told it?
Yeah. So Unmothered really began as well, it began as part of my dissertation work. It began as a part of my own healing journey. It began because I was convinced that there was a real power in attaching language to the experience of being adopted. And when I got to grad school, I recognized that I had been using writing my whole life since I was 14 years old as a tool for managing my really big, intense, overwhelming emotions. And I had also been doing theater. I started writing poetry at 14. I started doing community theater at the same time. And those two things were lifelines for me. And then shortly into my entrance into graduate school, working toward my PhD, I took a class called Poetry and Healing. And immediately I was like, oh, this is the thing I've been doing my whole life. It all of a sudden started to click into place. And the more that I studied, the more that I researched, the more that I looked into the field of therapeutic writing and expressive and therapeutic writing, and specifically poetry as a therapeutic tool. And they're all in the bookshelf behind me, but there's all this literature that was written for several decades about how writing about trauma can help us heal. But in none of it was anybody talking about maternal separation or family separation or pre-verbal trauma and adoption as lifelong traumas that needed to be addressed. They were talking about single event experiences that are also socially acceptable experiences of trauma, right? And socially acceptable experiences of grief. And so I realized there was this gap in that particular field, and I thought, well, I can do something about that. And then I made myself the subject of the research, right? And so Unmothered really came out at me, and so it started as a need to tell a story that was mine,
Sure.
that I hadn't been able to tell before, and it has grown into what I consider to be an integral part of what I have started calling the adoptee canon.
Yeah.
And it has had impact far beyond what I even imagined when I started writing it. And it needed to be in the way that I told it, because the poems, when I went back to them and I started looking at teenage me on those pages, and 20-year-old me and 22-year-old me and 25-year-old me and 30-year-old me, I could see so clearly how much of my unacknowledged grief and loss was showing up in those words and images, and how if anybody had bothered to ask me what I was writing, and or if I understood or felt safe enough that I could share that with someone in my life, that I might have gotten the appropriate kind of help and support sooner.
Mm.
And so the poems really became the emotional glue of the piece, and the way that only I could tell that story.
That makes a lot of sense. And I've seen it and experienced it in person live. And it was an event for me. Even experiencing the people around me as they were experiencing it. There's something, again, back to community. There's something about being in a community of people that understand you pre-verbally. I don't think people get that. I mean, how could they? They haven't experienced it. There's something so powerful. I have the chills even talking about it, about being in an environment where people get it, like really get it at a cellular level. It's so powerful.
I was actually thinking about this earlier. I was driving to therapy and I was thinking about how special and important it is to me to be in community with other adoptees because there's an instant connection that I feel that I think many of us have expressed this when we come together in various spaces, but that we don't have to work so hard to be understood. And that's honestly one of the most beautiful things about getting to share Unmothered in adoptee specific spaces is that every time someone sees it, adoptees say to me, "This is the first time that I feel seen, heard, and understood. You have just put language to everything I felt my whole life but could never name." Right. And it becomes a communal experience. And then that was the other reason that it needed to be a live piece of embodied storytelling because from a research perspective I had sort of theoretical grounding of the expressive writing and knowing that there was all this research and evidence that supports the fact that when we engage in writing specifically about traumatic experiences, it helps us to have better mental and physical health outcomes. And also live performance is theater builds empathy. And when you sit in community in a shared space as an audience member watching an actor or a storyteller or a group of actors on stage telling a story, there's an empathetic exchange that happens. And there's a different level of connection created in that intimate experience. And so being able to give language and voice to the universal internal experience that I now know after many years of working with adoptees and knowing and loving so many of you is that regardless of our circumstances and our identities, the internal experience of what it feels like to be an adopted person is the same.
Yeah. It truly is. Now, you've answered already a couple of things. I think there's a lot of, when it's pre-verbal and there's not a lot of language for us, a lot of things can really surface that we don't understand and only sensation understands. And so the embodiment is what's so, so important. And that's a lot of what I do too. And so it's that whole idea of you and I both work with adoptees who have, a lot of them have already done a lot of talking. They've been in and out of therapy multiple times. They've probably not even really thought about bringing up adoption. Some did and got nothing because of it, because it's so crazy. Even in my training, and I talk about this all the time, nothing was said about that. What actually brought me out of my own fog, if you will, was when one of my professors, who was a foster parent, pulled me aside after finding out I was adopted and told me, "This will damage people if you help people without working on it." It was that whole idea of, I did a podcast episode on it. If you have skeletons in your closet and if you don't face those skeletons, you're going to harm people. And I just felt like, what is happening? So I realized from that, I got to deal with this. If I'm going to be helping people, I better figure this out. And so I think you spoke to the whole idea of why story alone or insight alone is often not enough. There's the need to embody the experience, to integrate everything that we experienced, because our baby was sensations. That's what our baby was dealing with. They weren't dealing with language. They were dealing with what was going on in their body. So until we are able to actually put that into words, it's difficult for us to be able to really, truly heal, in my opinion. And I'm curious, I mean, you basically just said that, but thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the parts of your story that I love hearing again and being reminded of is that the long and nonlinear path of healing requires so much deep inner work, particularly if we're going to step out on the other side of it and into guiding others along a healing journey, which is what you and I both do. And you and I have both done a significant amount of our own work over many years, because it was no longer good enough to be in survival mode. And we talk about the need for an embodied healing experience. Well, that was so much a part of my process with Unmothered. That was the other piece of it, was that I knew that the finding of the language and the writing of the story and the breaking of all of those long held silences was critical to the process. And in that process, so was because I made myself the subject of my own story, and instead of the object in the story that had been told my whole life. And that's true for all adoptees. We are the object in the story. We are literally
the reason for the othered part.
Exactly. And we have all of these multiple disruptions and disconnections. And one of the hugest disconnections is the disconnection to our bodies, because our little baby selves were taken from the only safe place we ever knew.
Right.
And then after that, nothing feels safe again, including our own bodies. And so it's a lifetime of work to be able to reconnect and feel safe in the body. And so for me, being able to attach language to my experiences, create a coherent storyline, and then go into an embodied rehearsal process, right? And that's the performance piece of it, is that as an actor, that's a very embodied process. And there are physical warm-ups and there are vocal warm-ups, and you're tapping into a nervous system process, right? Because also performance can activate our nervous systems
so much.
And so one of the beautiful tools that I have available to me is something called Fitzmaurice voice work, which my life and creative partner Jeremy teaches, is one of the modalities that he's trained in and teaches. We used Fitzmaurice. It's a trauma-informed process of that breath and body work. So it's a very somatic process that we used in rehearsal to stage Unmothered and to start to integrate the story. And it's because, and I talk about this in the show, but it's because I spent 15 plus years in therapy from the time I was 14 years old until I was in my mid 30s. So it was a little more than 15 years, but of course there were some breaks in between. And we never talked about adoption. And I got to a point where every time I left an appointment with my therapist at the time, I felt worse than I went in.
Yeah.
And that made me pause. That was like, wait a minute, why do I feel this is supposed to help me? Why do I feel worse? And so in retrospect, that was me listening to myself for the first time and recognizing that there was a disconnect, that something was wrong and I needed something different.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that's so important for all of us adopted people, is to be able to start listening to our bodies again and attending to our needs. And that's what this, not just putting language to things. Yes, we need to have language to describe the experiences, and we need to know where that lives in our bodies, so that when an experience shows up that activates something in our body that feels like that other time, we now have language to describe it to ourselves, to other people in our lives, and then to a therapist, so that we can maybe find the appropriate therapist to work with and to help us move through. But also talk therapy, just from a research perspective, we know that cognitive behavioral therapy does not help people impacted by trauma.
No, it does not.
You cannot talk your way out of, as you say, a felt experience.
You can't think your way out of it either.
Nope.
It doesn't work.
So doesn't.
No, it doesn't. But even
fact,
yeah.
I will say something about that. After I started grad school and I was in the beginning of my really deep healing journey and starting to figure out make a lot of connections, Jeremy looked at me one day and he said, you can't PhD your way out of this.
He's not wrong. Thank you,
and
Jared.
I said, I know. And because my first line of defense has always been to gain an intellectual understanding.
To study.
And I think it's important, right? I mean, that's why the beginning of my process was reading all the books. So I read The Primal Wound and I read Journey of the Adopted Self and all those texts because I needed an intellectual understanding. And that helped me start to put language to the thing that I had felt was wrong with me my whole life. But except it wasn't wrong. It was just
Right.
something that had never been allowed to be expressed.
Or uncovered even.
Right.
Yeah, it's an uncovering. What we do is an uncovering, and it's gentle. I think me too. I did the exact same thing. I voraciously read to understand. Primal Wound is what gave me language the first time. I just had never, I remember crying through that book. Oh my gosh, this is how I felt, but I didn't even know. It was so good. I think talking about language and narrative and body and what we do, one of the things that you said I want to highlight, you talked about being able to connect where that emotion, the feeling lives in our body. And that's a lot of what I do. It's actually teaching the body language, teaching what does the body actually say in this specific center of your body. We learn the new language. And that's what it is. It feels like you're learning some new, completely like on Duolingo. It's not easy and it takes some time. It's simple, but it's not easy. I will say that. There's connections that we begin to make, and then the light begins to dawn, and we're able to and why narrative and body are so, so, so powerful. Because once you're able to place that understanding together, that's where this happens to me every time something powerful comes upon me. That sounds funny, but my whole body feels chills. That's where the transformation happens, is when those two can converge. And witnessing that is so powerful. I have a client right now who is really, really dealing with the trauma of it all. And her body is beginning to actually let her feel the sadness and the desertion and the rupture. And it's hard for her to make sense of the fact that, like you described, this is from past. This is not current. Your body's remembering the past. And all we have to do in those instances is show it compassion, allow it to move through us, be with it. Don't fix it. There's no fixing needed. It's being with that's needed. And that's, I think, if we could really put to words what we're going to create around Unmothered and the arc that that in a lot of ways you have created with my framework in mind, what would that look like?
Well, there's a reason for a specific arc, right? Because I've been in adoption land a long time, and there are lots of amazing adoptees who are creating spaces for us, who are offering people opportunities to find and use their voices in various ways. But not all spaces are created in a trauma-informed, trauma-specific, and trauma-responsive way.
Bingo.
And can actually do harm. It's the same, it's intent versus impact, right? The intentions are really good, but the impact of those containers can have harm. And so, you and I have talked about this a lot in our conversations over the last couple of years. I'm always really aware of building and creating containers. I like to call them containers where
me too.
Where people can get the support they need in a holistic way. And so for the retreat that we are planning and then will facilitate in May, the healing arc, I'm sort of describing it as a catalytic healing arc.
Yeah.
Because it starts with a catalyst, and the catalyst is the performance of Unmothered, right? And the shared witnessing of the story. So like you described a little while ago, being in an audience with other adoptees who are sharing the experience of witnessing, perhaps for the first time, all of this language being attached to their internal experiences. And then in terms of the research behind this, one of the most important parts of using creativity, narrative, art to heal trauma is being witnessed. Right? So the first part of the arc is about witnessing, because then that's going to open up some things in people. Because as you know, the first time you saw Unmothered, people are crying. People are hugging themselves in the audience. People are hugging each other. People are holding hands. There's a lot that comes up, right? And it's opening up that conversation with our bodies, right? Because of the experience of witnessing and hearing the story, and in its narrative and embodied form.
And if I can, I just want to interject here because the reason why I personally think Unmothered is so powerful is because you show the embodiment with your language. So again, getting the chills, what's really interesting to me is a lot of those things that you described, people hugging, people holding hands, it's involuntary. You know what I'm saying? They don't consciously do it. They do it because they feel the sensation of what you're experiencing on stage or on the screen when we see it on the screen. That's the power of it.
Yeah. And so we do the witnessing, that starts to open up some things in us. So then we have opening, and that opening is a discussion around starting to say what we're feeling in our bodies, right? Then we move into integrating what has come up in the first part of the series through watching the show, through having the opening dialogue and discussion, and starting to make those connections between the stories that our bodies are telling us and what the language that, borrowing language from the show. And then we move into the integration piece, and that's such a huge thing, is being able to integrate. And I was just telling my therapist this earlier, that especially this past year, there's been so much integration of so many things for me. My life has shifted in a lot of ways. But then we move into the integration piece after the dialogue, which is then followed up by a somatic healing workshop that you're going to facilitate, because then we can start to integrate what's going on in our bodies, right? Learn tools, and then the settling and the finding belonging. We move into those pieces over the course of the weekend, letting things settle, doing some light physical activity, and then stepping into the narrative process, which then ties all those pieces together and helps people start to put language to their own experiences. And it's intentional. The somatic work and the narrative integration is intentionally chosen in order to help everyone who's with us in May move toward wholeness, truth, and an embodied sense of belonging. And when we talk about, I know when we talk about embodied belonging, it's not only belonging, it's belonging to ourselves again.
Right.
Right? Being safe in my body. In fact, one of the opening lines of Unmothered is be here. It's okay to be here. It is okay. Adoptees don't feel safe in our bodies. Right. And I talk about the impact of not feeling safe in our bodies. But the thing I've learned is when I'm in my body, I feel better. I can trust myself more. It's taken a lot of work, but I no longer want or need to flee my body, because I can be this is really about presence.
Yep, exactly.
And for adoptees who, as we said earlier in this conversation, who have spent our lives learning to adapt and be chameleons and read the room and are hypervigilant and are so attuned to everybody else's needs that we just completely divorce ourselves from our own needs. When we start to become present with ourselves through a process like we're creating with this retreat, we can step into every other part of our lives with much more grounding, much more agency, much more autonomy, and building toward a greater sense of alignment and ultimately authenticity. And those are my 4 A's that I talk about a lot, that are built into the migrating toward wholeness process. Because we've lived in many ways inauthentically because we've had to adapt to our environment.
Yeah. It's very true. It's interesting that yours are 4 A's, mine are 3 C's. It's curiosity, compassion, and creation. And there's so much more to that. But I think that's why I've called you my sister from another mister for a long time. I just feel like it's so interesting. When I first stumbled upon you, I think we both were kind of surprised. There's another human who might think the way that I do, potentially. This is interesting, because I hadn't found anybody. And so I think I left that conversation kind of dumbfounded. I don't know what is happening or what's going to happen. It's just really interesting to me. I really don't believe in coincidences. I believe in synchronicities. And so we were brought together for a purpose, and we are pulling together that purpose now, which I'm so excited about. So all of that to say, yeah. So great job describing the arc. So good. I'm so excited to watch this happen. The question that I have here, and you and I have talked about this, but I don't know if I've ever asked this. Why do you believe that this kind of healing integrating the body, the story, community has been missing. And I say that strongly, and I don't mean it insensitively, from the adoptee space until now.
Because it's a heavy lift. I think that it requires pulling together so many different practices and so many different pieces and bodies of knowledge. And I think that I think we're at a point in time where our community is ready for it.
Yeah.
I've been, as I said, in adoption land for a long time now, and watching spaces evolve and new spaces pop up and people trying things. And often people have one thing that they do, right?
Yeah.
And it's about, so people sort of get into that niche of like, well, I'm a sound healer, for example, right? And that's the thing I do, and that's great. But I think what's happened, and why the universe brought us together is that we are two people that were thinking really expansively about a healing journey and a healing process. We also engage in an in-depth healing process individually, right? To tell you all the things I tried, and I knew that therapy alone wasn't going to solve whatever, I put this in quotes, the problem was. That I had to gain an intellectual understanding. I had to have and then I had to start to peel back the emotional layers, and then I had to start to do the embodied work that was necessary to become more integrated and whole. That's why my process is called Migrating Toward Wholeness, because that for me is healing, when we can come to a greater sense of wholeness in ourselves. And for you, that's belonging, but it's very closely connected. But I think that this has been missing because we have been preparing to create this by virtue of the fact that we have been on such incredible journeys ourselves, and now can really be intentional, supportive guides to other people because of not only our lived experiences and the deep healing and inner work that we've done, but also our educational backgrounds and experiences. And I'm a big creative thinker, and I am really good at seeing the big picture and then all of the multiple parts and details to bring something together. And it's so exciting to me that we're at a moment in time where we're finally able to offer something that hasn't yet existed.
Yeah, I think that's true. There's a couple of things that came to my mind, and I was trying to make sure I grabbed them. One is the idea of all the different things that we tried. We tried this and that, CBT and EFT and EMDR and reading and yoga. And you name it. We've tried everything. And collectively, together, we've talked about all the different modalities that we have attempted. And all of them are good. But when you bring them all together for an adoptee, that's when they become the catalyst for change. And I think you describing it as being able to see the umbrella and the big picture, it's so funny. I wonder, have you ever done human design? Do you know what that is?
I mean, I'm familiar with it, and I probably do it intuitively. But it's not something specifically that I studied.
Well, you've said words that, and I've done study of it. And so you've said words that come from that whole idea of that you and I, in a lot of ways, I believe were put on this earth for this. Somebody else would do it if we didn't. And I think we have been brought to such a time as this. So there was that. And I think, so I'm going to do two parts of this. As you were talking about being able to see the umbrella, in human design, that's a projector. So I would wonder if that's what you are. I'm a manifesting generator. I can spin a ton of different things all at one time. And actually, I feel alive doing that. That makes other people, other designs absolutely crazy. Can you just focus on one thing? Stop it. Nope. This is how I do things. I love it. It totally fills me up. But we, as manifesting generators, need projectors in our life, if that's what you are. I'm thinking you might be, in order to see the big picture, in order to be able to pull everything together. And it's fascinating to me. So there's that piece. And then what were you going to say? Go ahead.
I think the concrete example of that is, and we started this conversation a couple of months ago. It started with Mike saying, what if we brought the film to Moscow? Wouldn't that be cool? And then me sitting here thinking, well, we're going to invite people to travel to come see the film. That's so cool. That's awesome. But what if it's something more, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, we both had that idea.
And
When
then
Mike
we
said
came
it,
and
yeah.
then we came together and I said, well, what if we're offering them something more than just the film? And then I sat down and I put together the whole outline and just developed the arc, right? Because I saw the bigger picture based on all the things that we were throwing out at each other. And so that's the concrete example of that, which is super cool. And I think, one of the reasons I love collaborating with people in our community, and I'm gonna say, I don't use this word often because I'm a spiritual but not religious person, but I'm really blessed to have so many connections with like-minded people who want the best for our community.
Yeah, totally. I've had so many conversations with those like-minded individuals too. They've said to me pretty point blank, you and Liz keep doing what you're doing. They know. They've been able to see, please keep doing what. Yeah, I know. It's so funny because they're like, nobody's doing it. Somebody's got to do it. And so that's encouraging. And then the second thing that I wanted to say is, I think because of our lived experience and the hard work that we've done, for me, it's been 20 plus years of work that I have done on myself. And I'm sure you could say the same thing. We've been able to, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like expedite the healing process for others because of what we ourselves have gone through.
Yes, I agree with that 100%. And one of the things that has deeply informed the way that I think about how I show up in the world is something called the social change ecosystem. And my dear friend Deepa Iyer is the creator of that. And I came across that probably in 2020 during the pandemic. And it just really resonated for me. And within that ecosystem, there are particular roles that you can, I don't like this language, but this is what's coming to my brain, so I'm going to just say it, assign to themselves or, take on. So
Sure.
what is your role? What is your role in the social change ecosystem? There are 3 roles within that ecosystem that immediately resonated for me, one of which is storyteller, the other one is healer, and the other one is guide. And in the definition of being able to be a healer and a guide, being a healer in that context is about recognizing the impact of trauma on individuals and systemic trauma and knowing how to hold it with care. And then the definition of being a guide is being able to use your discernment and your experience to support others. And that is very true. I wouldn't be able to do the work that I do now. I wouldn't have been able to come to developing the framework and methodology of migrating toward wholeness without the entire life experience that I've had and without really looking at it and combing through it.
Dissecting it.
It's what, like, having it all, I've said this in other conversations. The reason it all started was because I hit my late 30s and I had this big come to Jesus moment with myself where I was like, if you don't do something, you're never going to be okay. And you're never going to have the kind of relationships that you need.
Yep.
And I have been on this huge path of sitting with so much discomfort, right? But that's where the growth and the transformation happens, is when we allow ourselves to feel and be uncomfortable and then be curious about that, right? And that's the whole making space to heal part of the migrating toward wholeness process, is about being curious about what we're feeling and then making space to hold that and start to express it. And so
interesting. Yeah, I totally relate. That's the self-compassion phase of my belonging blueprint. It's the same idea. Yeah.
But yes, we wouldn't, if we hadn't been through what we've been through, if we hadn't started paying attention to all those experiences and then done the work to, I talked about this the other day with Stedney, who you know,
Love her.
I love her too. We were having a conversation and and she said to me, but you make it look so easy. And I said, well, listen, I was once really down in that valley at the bottom of the mountain, struggling to climb out of that valley to get to the base of the mountain. I said, now I'm the person who's at the top of that mountain and I'm able to support others to keep climbing up to meet me. But it's a process. And you said that earlier, right? This is not easy. And it's a process. And I think that's also a big part of why we're creating this, because we're paying attention to who's continually showing up and what are people asking for.
Mhm.
And people are asking for spaces where they can start to do this work. And this retreat that we've designed for May is really about offering people an opportunity to start to do some in-depth work
Yeah.
in community.
In a safe container.
Yeah.
And of course, we can't say, I don't like it when people say, come to my safe space. Okay, that is something they have to experience and know that that's what they're heading into. We will do everything in our power to make it that way. I really appreciate how you just described that. I think it is so important to be able to integrate all of this knowledge. I mean, goodness, that's what it felt like. I felt like I was dissecting and delving and deepening my understanding. But like you described it, a mountain, which is so funny, mountains are on all of my logos, because mountains and rivers, because this is our life. We just through all of that always, right? And it's funny, I wore this color in honor of you because it's that muted pink. I don't have lavender, so I wore, and I think you're wearing green.
I did. I woke up today. It's very, we just,
Telling you. Anyway, so really excited to even share the logo with you, you guys, that we've created to make that. It's just going to be such a healing event. And one of the things that I do want to say about that, and I think both of us feel, I know you want to say something, so I see you and I got you. One of the things that we both feel is, I believe, healing is not something you arrive at. It's something you continue in for the rest of your life. So I just want to say that it's not like either she or I are completely healed. That mountaintop experience she just described, the way I describe it in my program, is a spiral staircase. As we go up the spiral staircase, we look down and we're able to look at that situation from different eyes. It's the same idea. So,
yeah. And I say it in Unmothered, right? Healing is not a linear process.
yeah.
For me, it's more concentric spirals of energy and emotion that I am working to process and heal one step at a time, right? And that's that idea of a spiral, right? That we're constantly moving, and that's why it's migrating toward wholeness, right? For me,
Right.
is that we're constantly moving towards something. And let me tell you, occasionally there are, I will put this in quotes, setbacks, and I feel like, oh man, I did all this work and now here I am back in this place. But that place is temporary, right? As opposed to a few years ago when that place was permanent.
Yeah.
I just
It
lived
felt
in,
that way. Yeah.
right? That was my normal, right? But now I know the difference between the old stuff, the old story, and my present integrated self. And the thing I wanted to say about us, I agree with you. Obviously, we cannot guarantee anyone's safety. We're each responsible for our own safety. But the intentionality and the care with
Right.
which I have curated every space that I hold makes people feel safe.
Mhm.
And that's a consistent comment that I hear back from people, is this is the safest space I've ever been in to be able to start to express and explore my story. And and I have experienced unsafe spaces where there's a lot of trauma dumping, but it's not safely contained. And then it keeps people in a
Yeah.
trauma,
It re-traumatizes them.
in a
Yeah.
trauma loop. And so being able to step into an I'll say intentionally curated space that is focused on healing, with the recognition that healing is an ongoing, lifelong process that is made up of a series of daily choices that
Absolutely.
that we get to make, and that you have supportive guides in that process, that we're going to give people, we're going to teach
Mhm.
people tools to put in their toolboxes to take with them, so that beyond the retreat they can start to practice
Mhm.
and move toward a greater sense of healing and wholeness.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. And that's the beauty of it. I think it's funny that you say people have said that phrase to you. What people have said to me is they feel like I meet them where they are, that it helps them to come home to themselves, which is the name of my company. But then it's so interesting, which is exactly what I wanted. That's what I want people to feel. I want them to feel like they're walking into their home after a long day of work, and that they can just be who they are and not have to be anything else and be accepted right there.
And I think that's what we all need. I mean, that's a human need, But I
Yeah.
think it's an adoptee need for sure that we can just be without having to over explain ourselves, without having to justify anything. And I'm very much, and you know this about me, but I'm also I meet you where you're at, and I
Mhm.
show up where
Yeah.
I'm at. And sometimes,
Be messy.
yes, 100%. Like, I do monthly retreats, and a couple months ago, I woke up and I had like I had an allergic reaction to something, and my eye was swollen, and I was like, "Oh, I'm a mess." I just have to. That's like being with what is, right? I can be with what
Mhm.
is with me, and I'm just gonna show up like that. My sometimes
Yeah.
messy human and authentic self, and let that be okay, and have other people experience that and know that it's okay to show up however you need to show up
Yeah.
with no
Yep.
expectation, right? There's no expectation for you to be other than who you are on any given day.
Yep. That's how we want this retreat to be, to feel, all those things that we just said. So, as we wrap up and talk about who it's for, because I think that's important. I think people need to know who it's for. If you've listened this whole time or watched this whole time, I'm glad you're still here. I hope you end up staying till now. So, who do you feel this retreat is for and especially meant for right now? The
Yeah.
retreat in May.
I think the retreat, I mean, obviously it's for adoptees.
Yeah.
It's for, it's for adoptees who are ready to stop feeling stuck, right? And that's a thing I hear so much from so many people who come to me and who I get to support in my migrating toward wholeness spaces, is that they feel stuck
Mhm.
and they know that they can't. And this is, I'll put this in, this is a direct quote: "I can't live like this anymore." So if you're an adoptee and you're listening to this, and something in your life and your body and your story feels stuck, and or you feel this sense of, "I can't live like this anymore, something has
Mhm.
to shift," this retreat is for you.
Yeah, it absolutely is. It makes me think of this. They've tried everything. I feel like I've tried everything. It's funny
Mhm.
because Tony Robbins
Yeah.
talks about you haven't tried everything because nothing's worked. So there's something out there you haven't tried. It just cracked me up. It's true though, but it's that whole idea of, are you ready for your next step? What is that next step in your healing journey? Because you've
Yeah.
tried what you know of up to this point. This is
Yeah.
the step.
Like, if anyone's sitting and listening to this and thinking, "Well, I'm ready to give up because I don't know, I've tried so many things and nothing seems to help," this retreat is for you. I want you to make a list of all the things you've tried, and then I want you to think about choosing yourself, making a choice to choose yourself, because that's what this is about. This is about stepping into a version of yourself that can and will be different when you find the right people.
Yeah. Guides, if you will. I'm telling
Mhm.
y'all, we ain't gurus. I don't
No.
want we both are on our own healing journeys. Like she talked about coming with her eye puffy. I There are days where I got nothing. And if you're a part of my free Facebook group, you'll see me do that. I do a Thankful Thursday post every Thursday. And there are some times where I'm like, y'all, I got nothing. I'll put in the group, I'm not doing okay. So I'll see you when I am. I can't. And then I'll talk about why I wasn't doing okay. We have to be present, like you talked about earlier, and authentic with ourselves in order to be present and authentic with others. So,
Absolutely. And
yeah,
that's the thing, right? It's my whole little
yeah,
tagline: more stories equal more connection, and more connection equals more healing. And as long as we're willing to continue to share our stories and be open and honest about our experiences with one another, we continue to make connections that allow space to heal, that allow the things that need to emerge. And I'm so excited to be able to offer a space that is dedicated to meeting people where they're at,
yeah.
that is bringing together somatic and narrative practices around the cultural event that is Unmothered,
Mhm,
right? That we're bringing together the arts and
mhm.
somatic and narrative practices into this very community oriented experience, where we're also going to be sharing meals. There might be a pool party. We don't know yet.
Maybe. Working
Maybe
on it.
we'll see. We're working on it. There's lots of things that we're percolating about, um, to bring, and this will be the first of, hopefully we'll be able to do this. My goal is to be able to do it at least twice a year. So
So,
the full
everyone,
year. So
join us.
join us and bring friends.
Yeah. Okay. So I think it's important to name, if we can quickly, who it isn't for. who it wouldn't be right for and why that's important.
Yeah, I think this is a hard one because I want to hold space for everyone. But I think it's not for you if you haven't tried a lot of modalities and you're not ready to step into some deeper work,
Mhm.
because it can be activating to come into a space that is meant to hold and contain a lot.
Mhm.
If you haven't explored any parts of your story yet, if you haven't started to think about the impact that being adopted has had on your life.
Yeah. Yeah, I would even add to that. And if you haven't, this might be a time to join one of our lesser, if you will, programs that can provide a foundation for you.
For
Um,
sure. Yeah. I mean, and that's the thing, right? We both have there's opportunities that are free. I host a monthly drop-in circle that is free and open to anyone, adoptees and anyone who is touched by adoption, who wants to start to explore and express and start to break some silences in a controlled and contained way. People are absolutely welcome to reach out to either one of us and have an individual conversation. Because if you're like, maybe this is for me, let's chat. I would rather
totally.
have a conversation with you and
Then
see.
you disqualifying yourself.
Exactly. I'd rather focus on the who this is for you. If something in this conversation makes you feel like, ooh, right? If you have a little, ooh, something, I'm getting tingles or I have chills, like Julia gets chills when things
Multiple times.
feel aligned, right? What is happening when you hear about this that signals that, oh, maybe this might be for me. And if you want to have a conversation, let's have a conversation.
Totally. So, what would you say to an adoptee who feels pulled, like you just described, but is afraid to show up in person? We've definitely
Yeah.
experienced people like that in our practices, both of us, and our stuff that we do. So, what would you say to them?
I would say feel the fear and do it anyway, my friend.
Amen.
I would not be sitting here now doing the work that I do, creating the spaces that I've been able to create, if I hadn't allowed myself to be afraid and do shit anyway. So that's my being a cheerleader for you. But if you're afraid, I want interrogate that. What is it? What is it that makes you afraid? I think a lot of times, especially in my own experience, the fear comes from over identifying with our trauma
Mhm.
and having lived inside a story for so long that that the trauma becomes our personality, and we feel like, oh, but if I get rid of it, then who am I,
Yeah,
right?
it's true.
And
Not
so
even think you could use your practices. Take the word afraid, do an acrostic, figure out what comes up from you, and then explore that even more. If you feel safe to do so, it would be an invitation to try.
yeah, I mean, I think sit with that fear, right? Because that fear is often something else.
It is similar to anger. They usually house something else underneath them. Yeah.
Yeah. I think too, choosing ourselves can feel really scary, right?
Yes, because we're not safe in ourselves.
That's
So it's
right.
hard to trust ourselves for sure.
That's so true. Yeah. And I also want people to know that there's not going to be hundreds of people. This is an intentionally small group
Yep.
in order to create a space that is individualized and supportive and meant to hold whatever you bring with you, including some of that fear.
Yeah.
It's
Yep.
always scary when you step into something new.
I will say on this, and then we'll go ahead and tie everything with a bow. But one of the things that I say to people a lot of the times is that resistance usually means you're on the other side of a breakthrough.
Mm,
Resistance usually means that. So I would encourage and invite you to lean into that resistance, see what comes on the other side, because I think you'll be really, really excited. Oh,
mm,
well, as we wrap up, my friend, I want to say this clearly because adoptees are often taught to doubt what they feel. If something in your body shifted, like Dr. Liz was referring to in this episode that you were listening to, that actually matters. Listen to that. Third, a revolution in adoptee healing isn't about becoming something new. I think that's really important. It's actually about returning to what's already there, what's already within you, that whole coming home to self, migrating toward wholeness idea. Beneath all of the adaptations that we've had to do, beneath the silence, beneath the survival, as Liz referred to earlier. This retreat is for adoptees who are ready to be witnessed, like she talked about at the beginning of the arc, to feel safely held in their bodies, and to remember that belonging was never something they had to earn. Y'all, it's happening. We're going to be gathering in Moscow, Idaho, May 23rd and 24th, and we would be overjoyed if you joined us to have you with us. We're really excited if you haven't already been able to tell. So you can find the details in the show notes. We are, I wouldn't say feverishly because we're good at grounding ourselves, but we're working hard to get these details to you. Yeah. And prepared for you for the show notes. And whether you come or not, we want you to hear this. And if Liz has anything to add at the end, feel free. We want you to hear this. You aren't broken, as a lot of people have more than likely told you in your life. You never were too much or not enough. And you were honestly never meant to carry this alone. And that's the reason why we're creating this kind of community. And for those of you who listen to the podcast, I will see you next Thursday. Please know that I will drop all of this in the show notes, meaning Liz's information. My information is already in there so that you can connect with us ahead of time. And Liz, do you have anything else you want to add?
I just want to reiterate how excited I am, and I invite and encourage anyone who feels something bubble up to join us, because it's true. Healing doesn't happen in isolation. It happens in community. And I feel so humbled to be able to create another space that invites deeper healing and connection for adoptees, because it's magical. And so I want to keep making magic. So join us.
I love that. Join us, and we will see you guys in May, hopefully. And I'll see you next Thursday. But thank you so much for joining me, Liz, and look forward to seeing you really soon, my friend.
Thank you. See you soon.
Hey, y'all, just wanted to reiterate the dates for Unmothered, a revolution in adoptee healing. It's going to be May 23rd and 24th, and we can't wait to see you there. Liz and I had such an amazing time recording today, and we are preparing, and we're so unbelievably excited to be with y'all on May 23rd and 24th. Have a wonderful Thursday, and see you next week.